So we need to continue in login form to actually log the user in. So how are we going to do this? First of all, you need a query, and this is going to be equal to select, and we need to select the username and password from, and let's go reference back to our table to see, from users. So we're selecting from users, where, and then we're going to say username is equal to username, and password is equal to password. So we've constructed here a query where we're selecting the username and password. In fact, we don't even need to do that. Let's just select the ID. So we're selecting the ID from our users table, where the username is equal to Alex in this case, and the password is equal to password in this case. Now we've got one problem already. Password is plain text, and the password stored in the database is MD5 data. So what we need to do here is we need to say MD5 wrapping around the password, which will then automatically convert this to an MD5 value. In fact, no, that's not going to work. I'll tell you why. If the user entered nothing, we're still generating an MD5 hash, so we can get away with not entering a password. So instead of doing that, let's create a new variable, which is probably better, called password hash, and that's going to equal to MD5 of password. So we've created a new variable. Now we can pop this into our query like that. So let's first of all execute this query. So query run equals MySQL query, and let's pop this into an if statement just to check that it works. So if that, then run this block, otherwise something. Now we've actually now predetermined, so if this query is fine and it works, then we can in fact no, we don't need this else here. If this query works, then we can do something with it. And what we need to do with it is we need to check how many rows have been returned. Now, if 0 rows have been returned, we have, if 0 rows have been returned, a username and a password don't match. So a username and a password combination haven't matched, which means they may have entered the correct username, they may have not entered the correct password, or vice versa, they may have entered the correct password but not the right username. So we need to create a check in here. First of all, we'll say query num, and that's, or num rows would be better, and that's equal to MySQL num rows of our query that we've run. And now we need to perform a check to say if query num rows is equal to 0, no such user exists, otherwise do something else. So here we're going to say echo invalid username password combination. Okay, so we've executed our query. As long as the query is structured properly and it makes sense, we're going to continue with this code here. Then we're creating a value of the number of rows returned. Then we're checking if that equals to 0. If it does equal to 0, it means that the username and password combination don't match, so we echo out a warning to the user and we don't log them in. Otherwise, we need to say OK for now. The user's logged in successfully. So let's use this as an example. So let's go back to our users table. We've got Alex in the password, which I think is pass123, but the MD5 hash. Remember, we convert the MD5 hash automatically when we process the login. And then we have various bits of information which aren't important just now. So let's try a user login that's incorrect. So I'm going to type Billy and pass123. Now bear in mind that pass123 exists in the database, but it doesn't exist next to Billy. So let's click login. We've got invalid username password combination. So our SQL query was structured correctly, but it returned no rows. Now, otherwise, we want to say if query num rows equals 1, then we can echo OK, because we're never going to echo 2 rows because the username is not going to exist twice. We're not going to have users on our website with the same username. So now let's try this with Alex and pass one. I think I typed pass, yeah, pass 123, and click login, and it says OK. So now let's return some of the data that we've been processing so we can make sure that we know, well, we already know it matches. But let's echo out username, and we'll echo out we'll just echo out the password hash so you can see how this is working. So once we've logged in correctly, username and pass 123, you'll see that this is the hash, the password hash of what we've entered, which is starts with 322 and ends with A24. So 322 A24. So we know that it's converted the hash properly. We know that anyway. So now that the user's logged in OK and we've displayed this OK message, we don't actually want to do this. This was just for our purpose. What we now want to do is we want to set a session with the user's ID. So we've selected the ID from the database, but now we need to get this data. So I'm going to say user underscore ID, and this is going to equal to MySQL result. Remember this function from when we learned specifics on using databases. MySQL result, we're taking the result from the query that we run earlier. We're going for row 0, and we're looking in the ID column. Let's just echo out user ID so we know this works properly. Let's test now with adding another user so we can see if this ID is returned correctly for each user we log in.